lives of men and women, the lessons in their journey that you and I can take away, and hopefully we can also chart our own path to greater good and impact on our society, both here at home and around the world. Now, I'm sure you know no one today would pretend we do not have a situation on our hands. We've been dealing with the coronavirus spread across the world, and we have our own number of cases, and there's a lot of work ongoing. While there's a lot of work ongoing to ensure that it doesn't become a major challenge for us to deal with, there is also quite a lot of work to be done in the way we handle information and how we disseminate information in an era where presumption is an everyday thing. All you need is to buy yourself a smartphone, sign up to a mobile phone network, and access social media around the world. You, from that moment onward, have joined the League of Content Producers. But as citizens interested in upholding the tenets of a cohesive society, do we have responsibilities that the access to technology brings? What kind of responsibility do I have towards my next door neighbor and my fellow user of technology? We'll be finding out more through a conversation with my guest in the studio, who is the executive director of Penplusbytes, and they are a not-for-profit organization that's ensuring that technology is used for good. Ms. Juliet Amoah, you're welcome to the Executive Lounge.
Thank you very much, Inshira.
And this is the second time I've had you on the show, but the first time was great. This time around is, so I got a double whammy. Number one is that we're celebrating all the brave women in the month of March, and so every episode of the Executive Lounge this month on radio has been dedicated to ensuring that our thought leader is a female.
Wow,
and
goodness.
secondly, because it's important to discuss the responsibility of the citizen and the use of technology in this digital age. You have a great deal of experience, outside of your work before Penplusbytes, but this is an organization that's focused mainly on ensuring that technology is used to advance good. Have you been concerned with what you've seen flying on social media since the news broke that we had some cases here in Ghana?
I'm not sure about being concerned. I'm just more of an observer, if you like, of how society is evolving and how it's playing out in almost all facets. And so for me, it's primarily the lack of awareness, if you like, that the real world is actually being replicated in the digital world, and that people haven't quite caught onto that whatever pertains in the real world is what then should guide what happens in the digital world. And this has changed over time. I mean, what we're now calling the digital age, or the age of information, started in the 1970s. A lot of the issues have evolved, a lot of laws have evolved. People are still not entirely aware that online you can face legal issues just the same as what you can face offline.
Okay.
So
I'm sure we'll get into that aspect of the conversation in a moment, but do I have a responsibility towards my audience? I mean, as a citizen, first of all, there are bylaws by my municipal assembly. I cannot cut the trees in my backyard and then burn the rubbish. And I can't run through a red light. So there are laws that govern how we should do things. But quite often, until someone raises an issue about, you either breaching their personal space in the workplace, or, passing a comment in jest that then is
harasses them.
Creates a situation. How does that translate into the world of technology? People are on all the peer-to-peer chat platforms, as well as the microblogging sites and all the social media platforms, and we tend to create tons of content. I mean, if I wrote right now that I'm feeling hungry and I want to eat an elephant, I mean, that's it, job done. Could I have insulted someone? Could I have offended someone's sensibilities? What should I be mindful of?
I think that digital responsibility is something that's key, and unfortunately we in Ghana, and actually to be fair, most parts of the world, haven't started to think about how to educate people about the use of the digital spaces that we have. So it is a matter of education. It is a matter of thinking about responsible consumerism, but also responsible content creation as well. So it's a two-edged sword. What are you putting out there, and what are you forwarding, and what are you creating yourself? How are you accessing the information? How are you fact-checking the information? All of these things are important if you do want to become digitally responsible. And so for me, the key thing there is, how are the people that I am posting information to taking the information? What are the social cultural contexts within which I'm operating? Because the digital world doesn't operate or exist in a vacuum. It's backed by what happens in the real world. As much as people would like to think that the two are totally different, I keep insisting that they are not. And so it's that sense of responsibility, that sense of knowing what's appropriate, and just being curious enough to find out what is appropriate, what should I send on, what I'm creating, what are the factors, health, mentally, how does it affect somebody mentally, and so on. Those are the sorts of things that we encourage people who are on digital spaces to think about.
It's very interesting you mentioned that these are things that you encourage people to do, and I think that in real life, I mean, I'd like to believe that majority of us are mindful, and so we're mindful of how we make other people feel when they interact with us. But I tend to, in my own little perch, observing what's happening on social media, it's as though people have this boldness that otherwise they wouldn't if they were dealing with people face to face. Is the digital platform giving us that boldness, or is it making us feel invisible because we're on a keypad and we're banging away and generating stuff?
It's funny that you should say that, because social media has it's strange. You're very visible because you have a handle, you have an identity people can see, and not unless, of course, you've created a fake identity, which is becoming more and more difficult to do, increasingly difficult to do. But so you're visible because people like to share things about themselves. Hey, look at me, I was on this trip here and elsewhere. And so you're not quite as visible or invincible as you might think.
Right.
And so we're quite vulnerable because of the kind of cookies and things, the algorithms that are tracing us and looking at what we're doing. So to that extent, we're not as invisible or invincible as we think. But yes, you're right. In that, it does give you that false sense of security. Nobody knows I can hide behind anywhere, a platform, especially these closed groups, WhatsApp and all the other chat rooms and online communities. I can hide behind there and say exactly what I want. And I'd like to say that that's even more dangerous to do, and it's the real and present danger when you're looking at health epidemics such as the one that we're facing. When, in fact, we do need clean data to work with, to take decisions with, to make those decisions, you need clean data. But here you are with a cluttered online community.
Very noisy.
Very noisy with jokes. There are fake videos. There are farms that are producing all sorts of content. People pushing their own agendas. People pushing their products. People looking to make a quick buck out of what's happened to us in the world. And so this is the time when that responsibility that I first spoke about is needed more than ever.
But how do you ensure that the majority are acting in the best interest of the greater social good? In the real world, there are laws, right? And we are policed, so there are certain things you can't do. If you go back to the Cambridge Analytica situation with Facebook, for example, one of the things that they often do talk about is that, you know what, we created this, humongous, space, monster, and we cannot police it all. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, if my memory serves me right, in the last 1 month, Mark Zuckerberg has been saying that maybe it is not up to platform owners like Facebook or Twitter to manage and police the users. I mean, what's your take on that position, and who should be doing the policing?
I think that there are two groups of people, and just to take you quickly back to what you were saying, online spaces do have legal frameworks, if you like, within which we ought to operate.
That's
just
right.
because we're not operating within those frameworks doesn't mean that those frameworks don't exist. You can be prosecuted for plagiarism. That's an online law. It's the equivalent of thieving.
Well, of course, you took someone's original idea.
You stole. You go to prison for it. Plagiarism can and does have consequences. So whatever happens in the real world has its offline or online equivalent. Yes. So that's the first thing. Now, in the matter of who's to do the policing, you're right. The IP owners and the platform owners can't do it all. And that's where the admins, the group administrators and the website managers, that's where we come in. Because if you do have a group, an online community, you should have laws that govern it. Those laws should talk about respecting people's rights, respecting yourself. They should talk about, allowing free flow of content, and so on and so forth. They should tell people that this is what this platform is for, and this is what sort of content we would like to see on that platform. And if people don't adhere to those rules and regulations, they should be taken off those platforms. Their content should be pulled off. And I belong to several thousands now of platforms.
Every day there's a new platform you get thrown on.
I think lots of other people in the world also belong to, especially here in Ghana. There's the old school, there's this.
The old school, old friends. I mean, people have even platforms for the street they lived on.
Exactly. And I have some great admins or just people on there who are continuously reminding the herd, the group, that look, this is what this is about. If you're posting content, at least caption it. At least tell us what it's about. Give us a highlight. And if that content is what this platform's for, then it gets to stay on. If it isn't, it's the admins that will take it off. So yes, the Facebooks and the Twitters do have some role in playing, to make sure that especially cyberbullying and trolling isn't happening on their platforms. But ultimately, group admins also have
three words heard: cyberbullying. Well, that's 2 words, but we'll count that as one. And trolling.
Yes.
I would like us to explore these. The trolling, I'd like to start with that. And I was amazed when I got a notification about President Cyril Ramaphosa's address to the South Africans. And so I go on Twitter and I'm watching this, and the comments that were just rolling. I mean, there was a moment where I was more excited to read what was happening in the comments than listening to what he had to say. Why is it that we've always been cynical and now we have an amplified platform on which to demonstrate that, or we have become so because of social media?
Perhaps it's the two. Remember that in our communities we have, for those of you who don't know trolling, it's ashibola.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, you've gone to say something that you ought not to have, or you've said it a certain way. So yes, it's because of the cloak that social media gives you that, but it's also because we've just been like that. Human beings are people. The Germans call it Schadenfreude.
Oh yeah,
where, you know, where you're
the pain
happy.
and pleasure. Someone's happy when someone's in pain.
Secretly happy that this person's goofed and it's not you, so you're just taking advantage of that. You know, so it is. But what we do forget is it's something that hurts feelings, and especially if you've got people who've got mental health issues already,
and you don't always know, especially because you may not always interface with people that you're connected with.
Exactly. And if they're not mentally in a good place and you're doing trolling and even cyberbullying, and then you're putting people at risk in the real world, where then they might I'd like to see a study. I haven't quite gone into a study that shows maybe the spikes in suicide within the last decade or so, but I'm sure that
there has been, I know of not a study per se, but there's been some reports that I have read, which may be isolated cases, but I mean, if it can happen to one, it can happen to 1,000.
That's right.
Let me take this opportunity to welcome anyone who's just tuned into 99.7 FM. This is Joy FM, and we thank you all, our discerning listeners, for joining us as we celebrate 25 years of media excellence. We try our best to make sure that it's worth your while tuning in to listen to us. The show is the Executive Lounge. My guest is Juliet Amoah. She is the Executive Director of Penplusbytes. They are a not-for-profit organization that seeks to help us all use technology for the greater good of this world. And we're discussing issues around our responsibilities as citizens to one another and to the larger society, especially in the use of technology today for communication. I would like to go into the herd mentality. So, it's okay. Well, it's not okay. So the example I was going to give isn't, but it does happen. Until COVID-19 pretty much shut down the world, every weekend there's a football match. So somewhere across the world, rivals will field 11 players each. They'll play a match, and thousands who are supporting the 11 are the ones who actually get into fights after. And usually, sometimes is, you know, happened and left very, very terrible scars on society, where it's escalated into violence. Are we naturally, do we naturally have a herd mentality? Where did all this come from? Where in the trolling and the bullying, it's very easy for sometimes to, you may have a differing opinion, a point of departure from someone's point on social media, for example, and you voice it out. And they call their cyber goons out, and you have this herd mentality.
They shred you to bits. Well, Inshra, as I say, if you and I a few years ago, a decade ago, had an argument, it would just be me, you, and the 3 or 4 people in the studio. You know, but now there's an amplifier.
We live in a compound house.
And that amplifier takes it to all the thousands of people who have the same ideas you do, the same worldview you do. And so they're not reacting necessarily on your behalf. they're reacting on their own behalf because now they're part of the conversation.
Right.
And so if you said something that I agreed with and I lived in the Czech Republic, I would be agreeing with you quite vehemently against that other person whose worldview is totally different from mine.
Wow.
But if a few years ago, I wouldn't have someone from Czech Republic or Russia or wherever agreeing with me. So it's just that we now have an amplifying tool. I wouldn't necessarily say that things have changed from when we were younger or when it was in the digital age. So.
Interesting point. Now, there are three categories of individuals or people, and I think we all, at one point in our lives, will fit into these places. So, one, if an admin of an online community,
right,
or a curator of a blog, and then the influencer,
right?
You know, and then the general user. Yeah. What responsibilities do these categories of people have in what they put out or what they propagate, even if they didn't originate the content?
Well, media information literacy is one of those fast emerging fields, and in media information literacy, what the concerns are is making sure that everybody has the same sense of responsibility, and that responsibility comes from how you create content, looking at your how you act and interact with content that's been created, how you execute, and the channels that you use. And all of these things are considerations that everyone in those three categories of people must have. Obviously, the general user is actually the person who is most what's it called, the culprit, I should say, in terms of putting out content that doesn't necessarily fit in with what the WhatsApp group or the online community has put out. Because you've said in your, I think that you said the three categories are the user,
so the user, the admin
who would probably
and then the
know,
influencer.
the admin would probably know and want to keep to the schedule and the norms and the regulations of that community. It's the influencer and the user, the general user. They're the ones who are the most likely to post content that they haven't reflected on, that they haven't fact-checked, which they haven't, kind of created. It's not original content. And so, but the question is, why do people do that? Why do the influencers do the things that they do in terms of just making sure that everyone's buying into their way of thinking or buying a certain product or leading people into a certain worldview? It's because that's the currency of the digital age. It's money is the currency of the real world, and in the digital world, in the digital
people, followers.
It's followers. It's who's listening to you. How much power do you have? How does your voice carry? And so those people are looking quite selfishly, I might add, at how to get content out fast, how to make sure that their opinions are heard, and the algorithms are helping them.
So in the pyramid of life, the influencers are nearer the top, and we're all in the broad base.
Exactly.
How do we protect ourselves and ensure that we're not being led down a path? That we, I might like you, I might respect you, but do I always take everything you say, like the Jimmy Jones situation where we all drink poison and die? I mean, is that how do we prevent and look out for ourselves?
So, two things. I think that the first thing is to be aware, acutely aware of what's going on in the online space. And in that awareness, you will realize that algorithms help create the content that you are consuming. How do they do that? If you're always Googling deaths and homicides and murders and accidents and whatnot, over time, the algorithms
start feeding that to you.
Exactly. The algorithms will realize that you're someone who likes morbidity, and so they will feed you that, whether you're in a closed group or an online space, they will feed you that. And what that does is creates a filter bubble. And so your whole worldview and all the information you have will suddenly be about death and angels of darkness and whatnot. And so it's your responsibility as a user to recognize that.
Wow.
And to stay away from the sorts of things that you Google and the sorts of people that you follow and so on and so forth. So that's the first thing. The second thing is just to look at, again, what I said earlier about what is this person trying to do and why are they doing it? It boils down to awareness, but this time it boils down to critical thinking. And so as a user... That's
elephant all over again. Critical thinking.
It is critical thinking. You've got to figure out this influencer, what's in it for them? Why are they so bent on sending this information about COVID and this conspiracy theory about China or whoever, whatever? What are the things that will that inure to their benefit? Once you figure that out and you back that with fact-checking, a stringent fact-checking regime where you're not trigger happy or not happy to just be the first to share on your platform, wakofaba, you're the one to follow, then once you don't do that, you're more likely to become a safer user and also a safer consumer of online content.
It's quite interesting you mentioned, not being trigger happy and trying to have your own stringent fact-checking regime. Just yesterday, I have a platform that I've put together, and I've been the sole benevolent dictator on that platform for 5 years.
I can imagine
that. And so someone posted something, and they had forwarded something they probably got from another, which was a conspiracy about the origins of the potential origins of the coronavirus. So I looked at a number of things in there and I said, okay, well, let me find out. They said this had happened in this place at this time. So I just lifted that element and said, Google, did this happen at this time? I said, okay. So there were these participants. How many were there at the time? I checked. Okay, numbers weren't too far apart. I was thinking, okay, so maybe I should look some more. And you keep on. And then this morning, I hear that, this has become a news item where China has been putting out this conspiracy theory that the Americans who came to Wuhan in, I think, September or October for the Military World Games of 2019 were the ones who spread the coronavirus there, and America had responded. But at least it's I felt a certain, and I don't know why I did that. How do we get to the point where I am acutely aware to the point it's second nature to check what I am giving people and passing on?
Well, I don't think we'll ever get there, because sometimes, you're overtaken by events, and I'm sitting here saying all of these things, but sometimes you forward something.
And then you're like, uh-oh.
No, I didn't quite say this one, because it resonated with me.
Yeah.
The last thing I forwarded, which I regretted forwarding, was a building somewhere in Africa, and they were calling it the Africa's building of Pisa. And if you know Pisa...
Oh, that one. I saw it too, yeah.
But if you took a close look at that one...
It looked Photoshopped.
It was Photoshopped.
So that got you.
because my worldview about Ghana or Africa and our architecture and our built environment was a certain way, I was quite happy to forward it. But of course, I did go back and say, look, I've taken a good look at it. It's photoshopped, guys. Just ignore and that sort of thing. So back to your question. How do you become acutely aware to the point that everything you're receiving, you're fact checking, you're looking at it, you're bearing in mind that there's Photoshop, there's the deep fakes and all the rest of it, and AI is doing all sorts of things. How do you get to that point? I can only say that it's self-discipline and just reminding yourself continuously.
Yeah. That you live in a community and you have a responsibility to everyone else around you. Right. So humor is important to all of us. I mean,
correct.
None of us would be alive if we didn't take time to laugh at stuff, at ourselves, at people and events around us. So this business of being responsible, couldn't that suddenly become the killjoy of social media? Because I mean, people give savage responses to things, and there are all kinds of memes made, and some are believable. It's fun to see them and forward them.
It is indeed. As for the fun to see them, you can consume that and know that it's a joke for you, but you have a responsibility when you're posting it to say that, look at the joke I just found.
It takes away the whole thing. It's like I'm telling you, okay, Juliet, I'm going to tell you a joke. I need you to laugh.
Yes,
you know.
But unfortunately, because not everyone has the same presence of mind, not everyone does the same critical thinking that you probably might do, and they might take the issues at face value.
Yeah.
And so it's important to put a disclaimer out there, or at least copy the website, even if you're not putting it out there that here's a joke.
Yeah.
You've put out the website, and if they're diligent and go onto the website, they will realize that, well, this is a website for memes and just jokes and so on and so forth.
Okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the audience who are tuned in to Joy 99.7 FM, this is the Executive Lounge with me in Sharado. My guest is Juliet Amoah, and she is the Executive Director of Penplusbytes. They're a not-for-profit organization that helps us use technology for good. It's 13 minutes to the top of the hour. You can join us with your own thoughts on 0244340437 by way of WhatsApp or Telegram. And if you have any questions, do shoot them over. If you have any insights you want to share, hey, this is a thought leadership conversation. Your thoughts are just as good as ours. And one thing that maybe our audience do not know, you're a trained journalist. You have practiced journalism. You still do practice journalism in a certain, sense. I would like to take your there's a convergent point. There's a point of confluence where traditional media, like Joy FM, social media come together and meet the people. So Joy FM carries a story. I'll give you a classic example. Over the weekend, there was a story about coronavirus case which went ahead of the government announcement. Created a furore. People on social media, some were unhappy about it, somewhere. I mean, how do we ensure that traditional electronic media and social media, where they meet?
I haven't seen the algorithm yet. It just means that as journalists, we have to stay ahead of the curve. We have to work twice as hard as the journalists of yesteryears. And I do know that Joy, for example, and others have droves of reporters whose job is to monitor online sources, on Twitter and Facebook and that sort of thing. I don't think there's any silver bullet to it, really. It is that you do have to work hard to stay in tune, and then, but what advantage I would say that trained journalists and media houses have is the trust that we still enjoy from the public, because hey, if it's in the newspaper or on radio, on TV, it must be the truth. Remember those days? Those good old days. It must be the truth. We've still got a little bit of that. There's still people in the rural communities and even in urban communities who still feel that,
once it's on the box is the truth.
It's the truth. And so we have a responsibility to, and I keep using that word because that's the only word there is for this monster or monstrosity that we've created online. So it's responsibility. We have a responsibility to tell the truth use the information that's online and use it wisely. But I can't say that we can always find a good convergence between the two.
If we were to, assume that we need to apply moral suasion and appeal to the conscience of every user of technology, who would you say would be at the end of the shortest straw if we ignore our responsibility to be mindful of what we put out and how we put it out?
Whereas I'd say everybody, I think that the young users are more at the shorter end of that straw because they're the ones who cannot by themselves unravel all the different layers that are and the nuances that exist. So they're more likely to be at risk, and but happily some of these search engines and online communities have made it such that young users can go onto sites that are specifically for them. So the content is age appropriate, the information is age appropriate. They don't have to reach beyond their years to try to unravel what's the truth, what's not the truth, and what's in between. Because there are a lot of in between spaces online, and it requires quite some critical thinking to be able to unravel.
5 years ago, I think Penplusbytes worked with multimedia to, it was your event and we partnered to work with you on that. This was dubbed the future of news. And I remember, I've forgotten the gentleman, was it Rick Marsden?
No, it was Ethan Zuckerman.
Yes, it was Ethan,
who created the pop-ups on Google and all search engines.
That's
so when you're searching and you see a pop-up,
that's Ethan Zuckerman, yes. Now, Ethan painted a very interesting future 5 years ago. Are we already living it? Would you say that it could get worse than it is now?
It could get worse if we continue to do the things that we're doing in the ways in which we're doing them. But if we become more mindful of the space that the online community gives us, if we become mindful of the content that we're creating, mindful of what we're sharing, and mindful of the fact that there are legal frameworks within which we ought to operate, I think that we could stop it right there, just the same way as governments are trying to stop COVID-19 in its tracks. We could stop it from getting to that dark and bleak reality where, your bullying is escalated, trolling is escalated, and fake news or disinformation abounds. We can stop it.
Right. As we get ready to wrap this conversation, I've been enjoying myself so much that I haven't been making the mental notes I do to be able to do my 5 takeouts, but God's on our side. Do you foresee in the real world, the physical world, so a state of emergency can be declared, which means that certain aspect of the Constitution can be set aside, restrictive movements and things like that. Do you foresee that ever happening? Is the internet governable? People have tried it.
Yes, they have, but because the internet or what happens online is so linked to the real world. In the real world, yes, you can set aside some things, but can you shut down the internet without infringing on people's rights? We're yet to get there. At the moment, civil society and other noise groups, if you like, and pressure groups have made it impossible for shutdowns to happen because we feel that they infringe on people's rights and so on and so forth. But hey, who knows? We might just get there where the whole world, because when China shut down and put its provinces on lockdown, everyone thought, they can do that because they are a
socialist.
Exactly. But 2 weeks down the line, Italy did it. America did it. UK, Ghana,
Madrid, New York had a curfew from yesterday.
We thought it wasn't possible, but here we are. It's happened, And so
France is
I wouldn't rule it
now, right?
It wouldn't
in
rule
about
it out.
5 minutes.
Yes, I wouldn't rule it out. So there you go. Yes, it can happen. We're not there yet, but we're wary of it because if it does happen, what are the infringements? What will happen to citizens' rights?
Okay, so here's how I'm going to deal with my 5 takeouts today. You're going to help me do that. So for me, from all of this conversation, number one is that the digital world is a mirror of and an extension of the physical world.
That's
so
correct.
the same mindfulness that we would attach and apply in our daily lives must be extended to that space in how we communicate, how we disseminate information. Same way that if you heard a gossip, you don't go shouting it on the top of the mountains, and you would be careful and mindful to not destroy someone's reputation. You also don't want to share information to put people's lives at risk. Number two is that with every freedom comes a responsibility.
That's correct.
And if we're going to continue to enjoy the freedoms of association beyond the physical and into our digital spaces, there are responsibilities. And number three, that people who find themselves in positions of influence or administrative control of some of these platforms must be clear in their minds what they want this to achieve, and every member on that platform must adhere to it and must know why they're there in the first place. Number four is that a little extra responsibility for yourself. I mean, same way if you picked up a drink from a supermarket and then you flip it and check whether it's expired, that's fact-checking whether it's good enough to consume. Similarly, you should be fact-checking the things that land in your inbox or in the blogging site you're on.
And there are tools.
Yes.
Many tools.
Okay. Can we find these on the Penplusbytes website?
You will.
Okay. What's the website?
www.penplusbytes.org. That's Penplusbytes.
Okay. So pen as in PEN plus PLUS bytes as in computer bytes BYTES.
Yes.
.org, and you'll find a lot of tools to be able to help you navigate this murky world of disinformation, fake news, trolling, herding, all of that. And number 5, I'm hoping that you should do number 5. Okay, so number 5 for me today is this, that I think it's just a call to everyone else, that in times like this, we actually hurt ourselves and the same group of people that we call the future, the same people we're hoping to hand off a better world to. So the technology we have today should not only be tools for amusement today, they should also be used as tools that create a future that our young can live in.
Brilliant.
Juliet Amoah, thank you so much for joining us for the Executive Lounge, and we look forward to having you again. Happy Women's Month.
Thank you.
And we're still maintaining social distancing. I think that I like Kofi Kinata. I can't think of any other song to play. I would like to play Things Fall Apart for you. It doesn't mean that things are falling apart. As always, go forward, make rain. And Mr. Kojo Meno is up next with the news, after which Lexusville comes your way with the award-winning late afternoon show Drive on Joy. Be good, be safe. Stay away from people who are coughing, and please, if you have to cough, use wipes and hand sanitizers, wash your hands, observe all precautions, and let's see you again soon. Take care.